Hi, this is Carol Pope.
Hi, I'm Kevin Staples.
And you're listening to Rainbow Country
with Mark Tara.
The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the persons appearing on the program.
Today on Rainbow Country, author Davida Breier is my guest, and she joins me to talk about her debut novel, Sinkhole, a coming-of-age story immersed in the 1980s in Central Florida, all set amongst mobile homes, golf courses, and of course, alligators. That and more on episode 315, so stay tuned. The Gay Talk Radio right here on Rainbow Country.
Hello, my name is Conchita.
And I'm Barbecue.
And my name is Hardcora. And we are the Beat Girls.
You're listening to
Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Well, hello and welcome to a brand new journey through Rainbow Country. As I like to call it, a little gay radio show working to give voice to the LGBT community and beyond. As always, I am your tour guide through Rainbow Country. I'm producer and host, Mark Tara. By the way, Rainbow Country originates from CIUT-FM in Toronto, and now proudly in syndication on 12 outlets across Canada, from coast to coast to coast. The Yukon, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the east coast of Canada in Newfoundland, Ontario, even down to Buffalo, New York, and online. Well, thanks to you tuning in, streaming, downloading, but ultimately listening. Together, we continue to build Rainbow Country into a nationally syndicated gay radio show, a #1 LGBT podcast on Podomatic.com's Gay and Lesbian chart, as well as being recognized as Canada's #2 LGBT podcast on Feedspot.com. So today, author Davida Breier joins me to talk about her debut novel, Sinkhole. Here's a bit about the story. Lies from her past, a dangerous present. All collide when, after 15 years in exile, Michelle Miller returns to her tiny hometown, Loretta, Florida. With her mother in hospital, she's forced to reckon with the broken relationships she left behind with her family, friends, and herself. We'll find out what inspired Sinkhole, Davida's award-winning zine background, as well as being part of the LGBT community. If that wasn't enough, we'll also hear some audio clips from the audiobook of Sinkhole. Plus an hour or two, music from LGBT artists, independent artists, voices that we've come to know and love in classic disco, classic 80s, classic house. And on this episode, I'm featuring some funk, some classic disco, and more. But up first, class is in session. A gay Canadian history lesson from activist and author Tim McCaskill. Today's lesson, Canada's LGBT community of the 1980s.
If we think of the 1970s as the period where the gay community was trying to get noticed, the 1980s was the time when we actually got noticed and started getting seriously slammed. The cops had never been happy with Trudeau's 1969 decriminalization. If you look at historian Tom Hooper's work, you'll see that arrests of gay men actually increased across the country after decriminalization. Remember, this was way before apps. If you wanted to hook up, baths or bars were the best places to go, so those were the places that police targeted. And there were a series of bath and bar raids in Montreal and Toronto and Edmonton and Ottawa and other cities. The Toronto bath raids of February 5th, 1981 are the most famous. When Toronto's pro-gay mayor, John Sewell, and the first openly gay candidate for city council, George Hislop, were both defeated in the municipal elections in 1980, the cops figured we were vulnerable and swooped. They smashed into most of the city's gay baths, trashed the places, and arrested almost 300 men on a range of charges. It wasn't just the baths, they were also hassling the bars on concocted liquor license violations, and they were busting individuals and bookstores for porn. Basically, they were trying to shut down the gay village and recriminalize homosexuality. But that night when they hit the baths, they bit off more than they could chew. In Toronto, for the first time, the activists and the small business people and the normally non-political bar and bath patrons all came together in a series of massive demonstrations. We raised money to fight the charges in court and won. We made common cause with Black and South Asian communities who are also experiencing police brutality and harassment, and we demanded community control of the police. We called for changes to the criminal code to get rid of antiquated laws that still criminalize sex. That new community unity also laid the foundation for dealing with the next crisis that was about to affect us all, the AIDS epidemic. This is Tim McCaskill, a gay liberation dinosaur from another planet and author of Queer Progress.
Hi everyone, this is Mark Tewksbury, Olympic champion, leader, humanitarian. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
My name is Michelle A. Miller. The A is for Anne, but I've never been told why. Maybe they thought the M's needed something in the middle, like the pivot in a seesaw, like it would balance me. My name should be an immutable part of who I am. But it isn't. At work, I call myself Anne. Anne Miller, the actress, was born Johnny Lucille Collier. When people are called something else, it is usually to hide from who they were. I work in the medical records department at a hospital in suburban Atlanta. I'm single, I live by myself, no children and no family history of cancer. I am not pregnant or on any medications. My pain level is between 1 and 2, physically speaking. My emergency contact is a TV character with a fake phone number. These are the kinds of personal history questions I stare at all day long. Furthermore, I don't have a cat, and I drive an anonymous-looking tan 1992 Ford Escort. These are reasonably truthful, utterly meaningless facts.
Davida Breier, hi, how are you?
I am well, thank you.
I have to say, thank you very much for being here, to have your voice, your story be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you for that, especially to talk about your debut novel, Sinkhole. Talk to me about the story that you're telling within the pages of your debut novel, Sinkhole. What's this story all about?
At a high level, it's a little bit of a hybrid. It's suspense, but it's also coming of age. It's set in the 1980s in Central Florida, but it's not a nostalgia piece. And the main character has been living in self-imposed exile for 15 years. She left home as the novel starts, and for the first time she's returning. And that return home is causing her to have to reckon with things that happened before she left, why she stayed gone, and begin to understand that maybe things aren't what they seem.
So, you just mentioned a coming-of-age story set in the 80s, Central Florida. You've got golf courses, you have mobile homes, you have alligators. Of course, you have to have alligators. All during the height of the AIDS epidemic. So here's the question. What inspired you to write this particular story of Sinkhole?
It really started with looking around at people I had met, had in my life, that people that were, I was watching on TV and thinking, my God, like narcissists start somewhere, but do we recognize them as children? Mm-hmm. At what point does the selfish behavior of a child actually become the malignant behaviors of an adult? And would another child recognize that right away? What kind of damage could they do? They do a lot to other adults, to countries. But what would that look like as an interpersonal dynamic? And that was the very seed of the idea. And I just started thinking about those interactions and time and place and class and isolation. And, it all started coming together into, relatively rural 1980s Central Florida.
So, Michelle, Sissy, a punk rocker, Morrison.
Yes.
These are all high school friends. They become a high school trio, inseparable until tragedy strikes. The plot thickens. They often say, "Write what you know." So how much of you is in Sinkhole?
I completely admit to being an 80s kid who loved television. I do love to swim.
Mm-hmm. But Any favorite shows? Any favorite 80s shows?
I admit to I was just obsessed with both V and Remington Steele.
Did you say V?
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are my two go-tos. But as far as any murders, no, did not commit those. I did grow up working class, and that, the class issues in the novel and the inherent class issues too, particularly I think, certain areas like Florida where you have such disparity. I thought that was kind of interesting to explore, and how, the antagonist uses class against two of the other characters.
So this is your debut novel. How long was this particular story of Sinkhole? How long have you been carrying the story around until you decided to write this, your first novel? How long have you had this story in the back of your mind?
I had always wanted to write a novel. I was the kind of kid that always had a book with them. I love to read, and I work in publishing. But this particular story, it was more than the story. The idea to write the novel came first. The story formed organically around the idea to finally take the plunge. But I started working on it at the very end of 2016 and spent most of 2017 writing it into the beginning of 2018. And then I needed to set it aside, and I finally picked it back up the beginning of 2021. And I just happened to hit right place, right time, great coincidence, and found an ideal publisher for the story.
Mm. Did you, because it's set back in the 80s, and with the AIDS epidemic happening, did you have to do any research for this book?
A lot of the research that I did really was more about time and place. I remember what it was like growing up in the 80s in Florida, and I remember seeing family, friends, and people I knew, and I could just see the change in certain communities. I know that I lost friends in the early 90s, and that aspect of it was probably a little bit more recall than some other parts of the books. I was maybe was meticulous about TV schedules, but other parts of it were more recollective.
Mm. And the title, Sinkhole. Well, how did you settle on this particular title? It
has multiple meanings, and the title, once you read the book, you'll see there are multiple meanings. On one level, it is, the sinkhole of narcissistic abuse and how people get sucked in and get lost.
Did you have other titles that you were batting around until you settled on Sinkhole?
I think I had some. I can't remember what they were because I remember the day I thought of Sinkhole and it became Sinkhole and that was it. And so it was probably 5 years ago that I had any other working titles, and I don't even remember what they were now.
As I read and file intake forms, I always wonder about the people. What do all the boxes of information represent? Is home an address or a place? Did anyone care for the person after the car accident? What if everything on the forms is a lie? When work is quiet, sometimes I fill out the forms for myself, creating new lives each time. Each one is as true as my employment application. I don't like who I am, so I hide and pretend in order to get through the day. I've always wondered if my father took part of me with him when he died, or if I would always have been like this. When I was a child, I used to tell people my father was killed by a giant snake. 2 lies and a truth. He did die because of a snake, but it wasn't very big, and it didn't kill him. A baby corn snake had crawled inside his car and decided to explore while he was driving. He freaked out and lost control of the car. A melaleuca tree killed my father. The giant snake made his death sound heroic instead of meaningless. I would pretend that the snake had never crawled into his car, or that I'd stepped on its egg and it was never born. I would imagine a perfect life, with Dad radiating at its center. At 8, I learned that little, harmless things could destroy everything without sense or reason. The Florida Highway Patrol found my father in the waning moments of his life, clutching the tiny snake, screaming that it had killed him. They could have avoided putting that detail in the report, spared us knowing, but they didn't. It was one of those stories that ended up as yet one more Florida punchline, a story to be passed around so people can laugh at death instead of fear it. My mother was unhappy with the obituary the Sebring Herald published based on the police report. It sounded like every other obit the paper ran, except for the snake. It read more like the snake's obituary. Walker Francis Miller died on Wednesday, September 22nd, 1976, in a freak car accident along State Route 70, east of Okeechobee. Mr. Miller had been distracted by a juvenile corn snake, a common non-venomous reptile native to Central Florida, causing him to run off the road. He is survived by his wife of 10 years, Penelope Penny Dean Miller, his stepson, Michael John Dean, 12, and daughter, Michelle Ann Miller, 8. He was 41 years old.
And on that note, we will return after this Rainbow Country update.
Hi, I'm Paul Poirier, Canadian champion in ice dance and 3-time Olympian, and you're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Terra.
Our Health, a Canada-wide 2S LGBT QQIA+ community survey, is looking for your involvement. The Our Health survey aims to explore the current state of health among two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, questioning, intersex, asexual, and other sexually and gender diverse people in Canada. The study team especially wants to hear from community members who are living with chronic health conditions like diabetes, cancer, and fibromyalgia. This is to ensure that people living with conditions that are often underrepresented or less understood are included in this work. Participants will also have the opportunity to do a test at home to screen for COVID-19 antibodies, HIV, hepatitis C, and syphilis. All data collected will be used to advocate for programs, services, and policies that better support the health and well-being of 2S LGBTQIA+ people across Canada. All participants will receive a small honorarium for completing the survey. For more information, visit cbrc.net/our_health. That's cbrc.net/our_HEALTH.
Minden Pride is coming to the Haliburton Highlands in Ontario, August 22nd to the 28th. Join us in a whole week of loud and proud events celebrating diversity, equality, and inclusion in beautiful cottage country. Come out to homegrown events like Drag Story Time, Queer Trivia Night, the Tool Belts and Tiaras Tea Dance, and much more. Wednesday night, laugh it up with an audacious group of queer comedians. Get dazzled by spectacular drag performers at the Viva Burlesque Ball on Friday. Join Sunday in the Pride Parade down the Gull River and check out all of the fun events for kids and adults alike at our Street Fest. Visit mindenpride.ca and social media for more information. Minden Pride Week, August 22nd to the 28th.
Hello, Canada. I'm author Anthony Badalka. I wanted to let you know that my latest novel, Going to Beautiful, is out right now. It's available wherever you get your favorite books. Going to Beautiful tells the story of Jake Hardy, a celebrity chef, and Eddie Kravitz, a fashion designer. They've got fame, a great kid, an awesome dog, and they've got each other. They really had it all. Until they didn't. Going to Beautiful is out right now. It's available wherever you get your favorite books. Talk soon, Canada.
Hitmakers is a full-service, award-winning record label and social enterprise based in Iqaluit, Nunavut. We specialize in the creating and marketing of world-class Inuit and Indigenous music, including pop, hip-hop, rock, folk, and traditional Inuit music. Hitmakers has studios in Iqaluit, Ottawa, and Toronto. The label currently works with more than 20 Inuit and Indigenous artists, and we represent and promote many more. The company was founded in 2016, and our mission is to create viable careers in the arts for Inuit and Indigenous artists through music, media, and education. Our secondary mission is to empower artists to share and strengthen their stories and culture. To learn more, please connect with us on social media or at hitmakers.com. That's hitmakers with a Z. Thanks for listening. The
phone rings. I got a message from the mayor. He's going to call me back the next day. I get the call, and he said, if you'd accept, we'd like to honor you with the key to the city. There was an event later that year in May. Just a key, right? Like, key to what? A decent job, a good singing career. It's really a metaphor, but it's history. So a reporter wants to talk to me and says, so it's a key, right? Like, what's the big deal? I said, well, not everybody gets the key. So I looked it up, and I guess it is kind of a big deal.
The date, May 17th, 2018, when trans activist Susan Gapka made history by becoming the first trans woman to be presented with the key to the city of Toronto. By the way, past recipients include Rush and the Raptors.
I'm Brian Bradley, author of Outrageous Misfits, female impersonator Craig Russell and his wife, Lori Russellidi. You are listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Terra.
So you've had various jobs in the world of publishing. I'm interested to know what drew you into publishing in the first place. Why publishing?
As I said, I was that kid that went around with, books constantly. I remember being 14 and, my own stretch of freedom was being able to bike several miles to the library. I was always drawn to books. My mother was an independent bookseller. I worked, I started publishing a zine and doing my own small press work, and then worked for a nonprofit publisher. And it just seemed like no matter what I did, I kept kind of coming back to books in some way. And that, I think I'm more flitted around trying to figure out what that would mean. And in 2003, I got a job with a distribution company, and it meant I got to do a little bit of everything. Development, talking with authors, working with publishers, selling, and I've been in distribution since 2003. And so I think that gives me a sense of how publishing works in a way that if I just had picked one editorial or design or marketing alone, I've come at it from so many different angles. I kind of wanted to know how the all the pieces fit together.
Sinkhole being your debut novel and having a background in publishing and in distribution, did you have access to publishers that you then pitched this novel to? And that's how you got your publisher, as opposed to being self-published, being your debut novel?
Initially, in 2018, I sent it to a couple of agents, a couple of publishers. The book wasn't ready at that point. And in hindsight, I could see that. I set it aside after that for a while. What ended up happening is a publisher that I've worked with since about 2005, and a university press, they had sent me their new books for the new season, and I happened to see a psychological thriller on the list, and I was kind of excited. I'm like, wow, no idea you were moving into some different genres, and I have something I've been working on. And I know the managing editor fairly well after all these years, and just kind of mentioned in a way that was not a pitch. In fact, it was almost an anti-pitch about this book I'd been working on, and kind of said, but you don't want to see this. This is a conflict of interest. And you're like, no, send it to me. And I did end up signing with them because I think they got it, and I knew what working with them would be like, and they knew what working with me would be like. So I did end up finding my publisher because I work in publishing, but it wasn't as I had originally intended.
Were you prepared to go the self-publishing route at all?
I didn't want to. And for me, it was because I knew I needed more of the tools a publisher would bring. The developmental editor I worked with at University of New Orleans was fantastic. And that was something that I knew I needed help with. Some of the structure a publisher brings. I also know that when you self-publish, you tend to rely on Amazon a lot. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted this book to find a place in independent stores and in libraries and in places where I felt what the characters had to say and where they might be best heard wasn't something I could do by myself.
So we've been talking about publishing, distribution. One word comes to mind, an old term, zines. Popular back in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s. Essentially a cheap way for an individual to get their story out, their magazine, their ideas, their comics, that sort of thing. In 2000, the Baltimore City Paper awarded you Best Local Zinester, and in 2003, Best Zine. Do you think your time doing zines, do you think that helped you when you did start working for publishing and for distributors? Do you think that background helped you at all?
I think it did in many ways. In fact, I remember one of my first publishing jobs, after I was hired, they were like, well, we saw you had published 6 zines, so we figured you at least wouldn't give up right away. So, I was in my early 20s at that point, but this, I do think it does help. I think it teaches you a lot about finding your voice, a lot about doing something because you believe in it more than, maybe something that you're trying to conform or make completely commercial. That it does give you the freedom, and it teaches you how to create in an environment that's relatively safe and supportive. And I also know that many of the people I've met and become friends with from zines over the last, 25 plus years, they were critical in my ability to work on this novel, for feedback, for ideas, for support. And there is a level of community to zines that they've been very, very supportive and encouraging all along.
What were your zines about?
I've done a couple different, what are called per-zines, personal zines, personal essays, whether they had to do with travel or, I did one that largely focused on my love of eels. Okay. I'm fascinated by eels, so I did a zine on eels. I've done them on, I did one actually pertaining to the novel that's kind of like a DVD's extras. The one I've published the most consistently and for the longest, for 23 years now, is called Xerography Debt, and it's a zine review zine. So it's meant to support other people who produce zines and let everybody know they exist and how to order them, and provide, feedback in some way. Whether, the reviews are generally positive. We don't tear anybody down, but it was always meant to be a supportive entity within the zine community.
Are you still doing zines?
I am.
Amazing.
Yeah, I did. As I said, I did one for the novel that just came out a month or so ago.
And so what got you into zines in the first place? One of my friends from high school introduced me to them, and I don't know, it was a medium that I really enjoyed. I think particularly for me, after I finished college, I'd been an art major, and it was the first time I could create something just because I wanted to. There was no reason for it. There was, it was just a chance to be creative and write or draw or, whatever I wanted to do, I could within those pages. And I found other people who felt the same way. So I think the community has been what's kept me in it. But I also feel the need to make things in whatever form. And zines have always been that kind of draw for me. I remember some zines from back in the day, and they would be, black and white, photocopied, stapled, very DIY. The zines of today, are they digital?
I'm still producing mine in much the same way that I always did. I mean, in the early days, I didn't have access to a computer, and it was cut and paste or handwritten. Some people are still handwriting and photocopying and cutting and pasting. Some people are using InDesign. It just depends upon who the makers are and what tools they like. But yeah, I think that while there maybe was some migration to blogs or, social media, I think that those of us that have stayed and continue to produce on paper are using a lot of the old methods. I do see more and more expensive, full color zines showing up. And those tend to be more for sale than for trade. Those of us that tend to trade more are still sticking to more affordable methods.
And how do you get your zines out, especially the one that you're still doing today? I mean, they're available direct from the creators, or there are whole zine distributors, Microcosm, bookstores that specialize like Quimby's and Atomic. So there are ways to get them, and a lot of us,
kind of maybe hang out a few places online, let each other know when new issues are out, or we just simply know we're going to trade and send trades off and write up reviews for one another's zines to let other people know they exist.
So let's get to know you a little bit better in regards to your personal life. Who doesn't like to talk about their personal lives? So you are part of the LGBT community. You are a bisexual individual. For yourself, when did you start recognizing that for yourself, that you are more than what people see? When did that start crystallizing for you in regards to your sexuality?
I think because the 80s were so black and white, it was a little confusing early on. And I think that as, I began to realize the gray areas, I was probably in my early 20s. But I was never much of a dater. So it's one thing to know something inside, and another that you're not necessarily dating a ton of people either. So,
and back in the day, it was, oh, you're bisexual. Oh, make a decision, get off the fence, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And it's that, you're never enough of something to someone. But I think once I kind of figured out, oh, okay, and this is, and I think in that respect, again, it was, I didn't have easy access to a computer or the internet until the late 90s, early 2000s. And I had been reading zines before that. And zines actually, I think particularly at that time, because they were so much more embracing of the gray areas in the world, zines were a great place to kind of figure yourself out and learn about other people.
Especially sexuality.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you are a creator, you're an author, you're someone who's part of the LGBT community. For yourself, how important is it for you to see queer content in novels, in writings, in books, in zines? How important is that for you to see LGBT content in publishing?
For me, it's important to see good content. Sometimes the content I see, having certain queer characters the villain, that is irksome. Or seeing queer characters as being, very flat and two-dimensional doesn't really help anybody. Really good three-dimensional characters is very important. And I think that, representation and reflecting, multiple people's lives, not just, a set idea from particularly, I see books written by, wealthy, cis, straight writers that are writing characters that they don't take the time to really get to know or understand. I think that rounded characters are essential, because how people are going to connect and identify, it's going to be different every time for every person.
So it's for you, it's more than queer content being part of publishing. It's the quality of it. It's not just the fact that there's something there.
Yeah, a token character doesn't really help anyone.
Yeah. The relationship between Michelle and Sissy, how would you describe that relationship?
I think it's complicated. I think that, it is a very toxic relationship. It's a very toxic friendship. At the same time, they both are very needy individuals, and they're getting something from that friendship until it begins to sour. And in some ways, Sissy helps Michelle as much as she hurts her. And so it's hard to say it's this, completely black and white, victim-aggressor relationship. They both need things, and they're both getting something for a while. It's just that Sissy ends up having a power dynamic that gets out of hand.
Is there an audio component to Sinkhole?
Yes, there is an audio version of the book. The Audible version is available right now, and I believe there will be some additional ways to listen when the audio publisher makes it more available, I think in August.
And how involved were you in the audio aspect of things? Like, did you get to pick who the actor was? Are you the one that's doing it?
I did not have any involvement in that, but I will say that the woman who narrates does a fantastic job, and her name is Anna Caputo, and she did a really nice job of embodying the characters.
I have to say, I love a good audiobook.
Me too.
And for you, this being your debut novel, were you thinking that this book that's a printed book will also have the audio book as well? Were you thinking that?
I have to admit, because I work in publishing, I know how expensive it is to produce an audiobook. I love audiobooks. I listen to them constantly. I mean, and it's sometimes the only time I really get to read because I'm often doing something else. I wanted an audiobook so bad for the book from the very beginning. So that was something that I did push for, and the person who's doing rights was able to sell the audio rights very early on. So I knew there'd be an audio component from maybe December. And I was so excited. I couldn't wait to hear that because it becomes a whole different book when someone's performing.
It comes to life.
It does.
I mean, yeah, people reading something, it's in your mind. Yeah, it comes to life in your mind, but it's like, it's a play. You're listening to, a play, in my opinion.
Yeah, and a really good reader, a really good book knows how to bring even more life into the characters.
Not a lot of books have audio components to them, but not a lot of first-time writers or even independent writers, publishers. So for yourself, how important do you think it is to have as many aspects of a book as possible? Like, you've got the printed version, you've got an e-version, you've got the audiobook version. How important are all those different versions for an author?
They're incredibly important in this day and age, given how the way, especially with fiction, it depends book to book. But for fiction, the audio and the ebook may actually outpace in units what the print book is selling. So having all the different versions, especially because everybody's reading in different ways now, that's pretty critical in modern publishing.
Yeah, a lot of people are consuming media in so many different ways. People are listening on their phone, on their headphones, at home with the stereo blasting while they're cleaning. I know that's what I do.
Oh, it's the only way my house gets cleaned.
I know.
I mean, if I had to just clean without that distraction, forget it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you put on I put on my Bluetooth headphones and
Mm-hmm.
go around the apartment with my vacuum cleaner, and I'm like, yeah, it's great. How long did it take to do the audiobook for Sinkhole? Do you know?
I don't know, but I know that generally I think it's 4 to 8 weeks, depending upon what their production schedule looks like. As I said, I wasn't involved in any part of that. I just know what I know from working on them a little bit for my day job.
Mm-hmm. So my last question for you, Davida, when audiences, when they read Sinkhole, when they're listening to Sinkhole, is there a message? Is there a takeaway that you hope your audiences come away with after they've read your debut novel, Sinkhole?
What I'm finding that I think is kind of interesting is that it's a different book for different people. And some people have seen it. Someone described it as a beach read, and then someone else thought it was just terribly dark. But I really hope that some of the messages that come through are some of the representation with Michelle, who's the main character, who, you know, it has a whole lot going on. She's asexual, and the friendship with her and Morrison. I hope that the depth of friendship and the importance of friendship, their friendship in particular, comes through. And, you know, I hope some of what I'm talking about a bit about the 80s not being this rose-colored nostalgia, and that it was a particularly hard period to be, you know, isolated and in the gay community, and that there was a lot going on, particularly for the working poor. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe people take a moment and reflect on the fact that this current kind of nostalgia bin that everything was great, you know, once upon a time, maybe they take a minute to reflect and see how we got here, with how things were really like.
Well said. Well said. I have to say, Davida, thank you so much for your time. Well said, well done, well written. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Chapter 5. Past. October 1984. There's the idea of high school, and then there's the reality. There are the kids everyone remembers, the star students, the hot guys, the beauties, the athletes, the bad boys, the troubled girls, and then there is everyone else. If you don't participate in any of it, it's easy to be anonymous. It's easy to be forgotten. Maybe there's an official school photo in the yearbook, or maybe you were absent that day, and no one noticed. Ocean Breezes High School has a nice name, but it was as landlocked as you can get in Florida. You had rich kids whose grandparents were often old Florida homesteaders who'd sold their land, or they were the people who sold the idea of Florida as a paradise to northern transplants. You had poor kids, usually old Florida poverty, having worked in the fields and orchards or at blue-collar jobs for generations. They got called crackers by everyone. There were also middle-class kids, but even middle-class looks rich when you were poor. The line between relatively rich and poor in Loretta was the electric bill. Rich kids had central air. They showed up looking refreshed and dry. Poor kids tossed and turned all night, seeking relief under box fans that shoved around torpid air and mosquitoes. If you were lucky, you had a screened-in Florida room, covered in jalousie windows and a huge ceiling fan. You could sleep in the room on the magically cool tiled floor when your sheets felt too hot to touch. We had one at our old house. Rich kids had feathered and ironed hair that looked like delicate cotton candy. Poor kids had sticky, humid clumps that looked like collapsed scaffolding. We battled the heat, humidity, and bugs day and night. Rich kids never understood we were at war with the environment.
Sinkhole is available wherever you get your favorite books, including Amazon.com, where it has a 4 out of 5-star rating. Plus, you can find the audiobook on Audible. For even more on this author, visit her website, davidabreier.com.
Bill 7, to ban discrimination in employment, government services, and housing, based on a person's sexual orientation, was up for a vote at Queen's Park. Most NDP and Liberal MPPs supported the bill, but without some progressive conservative legislators backing, a divisive split could rack the province. 4 PCs decided to break party ranks to vote with their conscience and support Bill 7. Cabinet Minister and MPP Dennis Timbrell did it to show solidarity for his beloved brother, the well-known drag queen Rusty Ryan. And for me, a gay politician who was not yet out, I had to take a stand. We were known as the Gang of Four. I'm former Cabinet Minister and MPP Phil Gillies. The date, December 2nd, 1986, when LGBT rights came to Ontario.
Hi, I'm writer Adam Smith, author of Deep Sniff, A History of Poppers and Queer Futures. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Hi, my name is Joanne Vanicola, and I'm an actor and a writer, and I was first on Rainbow Country with Mark Tara on discussing the massacre at Pulse Club in Orlando. I realized how important it was for our community to have a radio station, specifically for our issues, to talk about people in the LGBTQ community and to provide an outlet for our stories, to discuss our politics, culture, and give voice to the issues that matter to us, and of course our artists and the things that we do globally, and talk about culture. And without people like Mark Tara providing a space for this with a radio show like this, then we wouldn't have that voice. So support, tune in. Thank you.
And just like that, this little gay journey through Rainbow Country has come to an end. For the full 2-hour episode, simply head over to marktara.com, where everything is connected, and hit the archives banner. To keep up to date with the show, make sure you follow me on socials at Mark Tara. The podcast is available on all major platforms, including audible.com and iHeartRadio. And finally, I want to take this time to thank you for taking your time to be with me. Remember, despite all the craziness that's going on in the world these days, remember this. We are living in days of making our dreams come true, so believe in yourself, and the world will believe in you.
Hi, this is Police Constable Danielle Botno, also known as LGBT Cop, and you're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.